Yay. Well, we've been talking about some topics that are seemingly random. We talked about failure, why failure is important. We talked about that last week. Failing to ponder failing is failing. Did you catch that? If you don't think through why you're falling down, that's going to just lead to more falling down. So we don't want to talk too much about failure. I'll do more on that, maybe a series coming up. I haven't decided, but we've got a few weeks here of seemingly random material. Today, we're going to talk about 4 things that high performers do that average performers neglect. Okay? So I want you to write down this 4 things high performers do, the people that are in the upper tier, what they do that other people who have decided to be average, they neglect. So I'm going to give you some strategies, 4 things. But I want you to write down real quick what you think it takes to become a high performer at LGFG. Then I'll adjust my light. All right, just write down a couple ideas. What comes to mind? What does it take to be a high performer here, regardless if you're a booking buddy, EA, clothier? What does it take to become a high performer? What would distinguish you? And what I'll do is I'll go through these 4 things real quick, super simple, and hang up. And then I want you to kind of say, that made sense, or that didn't, or here's some things to add. Because this isn't like the final chapter on high performers at all, but I just think this is something to think about that maybe you didn't write down. All right, so let me say that high performance is not an accident at all. And if you're not practicing, you're not improving. If you're not practicing, you're not improving. What I mean by that is if you're not focused on changing some aspect of how you work your career, you probably won't improve just by being around a long time, right? Being around in the business doesn't make you good at it. Yeah? It's just like, think back to if you had a chance to go to university, or think back to school. People say, well, experience is so key. Well, that would mean that your oldest professors would be the best teachers. Is that correct? Not always. I mean, sometimes they are, but sometimes they're stale, because they're not practicing, they're not improving. So it's not always how long you've been doing something, but how focused you are. So that's why some of these new up-and-comers are getting bookings rather quickly. I think Lucas may have, maybe Filippo. I don't remember. I heard it. It was just a rumor. So here's the first one. Number one thing to distinguish yourself if you're going to be a high performer: plan it. Plan it. That's 2 words, not planet like Saturn, but plan it. I have a friend who totally transformed his body from jelly. He was kind of a couch potato, as we would call it, to he had steel abs. And he doesn't just show up at the gym and say, today's Tuesday, it's time to work out. He actually plans his workouts. Does anybody do that? Good. I knew Charles would. The old hammer throw guy, he focused on stuff. So planning is so key. This guy I know, he knows one day is his cardio day. He knows that the day after tomorrow is his biceps day. He might even have a day that focused on his back muscles, to strengthen his core. So how are your workouts? Do you just show up, or do you plan them? I am not a great planner, not my strength. So that's why on the master swim team, we have a coach who was a former Olympian who is not much fun to be around. But she plans for us. So in LGFG, do you plan your week? Do you have a focus? Like, okay, it's Monday. I just finished Monday. What's my focus from Tuesday through Friday? What areas am I working on? Do I need to really key in and have Chris help me, or have Maria help me with my phone approach? How's my tone? Maybe that's just the one thing you focus on, but you plan. This is my plan for the week. Some of you are still wrestling with floating. So what's your plan for improving? You've got to plan your development. So if you don't know what you're working on, you're just beating the wind, which is frustrating if you've ever tried it. All right, so that's strategy number 1 on my list. To be a high performer, you got to plan and zero in on something. Second thing, number 2, is you have to, what I would say is, first step, plan it. Second step, watch it. Watch it. Determine what you want to improve, and then you watch experts do it. You watch someone who's really good at the area you want to improve in, and you model that behavior. People ask me, well, how do I get good fast? And the answer is you model behavior. That's the fastest way to learn something new. Okay? I mean, sometimes it's fun for me. I'll just analyze as I'm watching, you know, if it's the comedy channel or whatever, I'll analyze comedians. Not to think, okay, well, what are some interesting jokes? I don't remember jokes. I can't do that. But I try to figure out what makes them humorous. And then I think, now that was clever. Why did that work? How was his timing? So I'm observing. I'm watching. If I go to a conference, a big seminar where there are speakers, I don't just sit after the conference is over or during the conference and take a few notes and go home and say, well, that was really interesting. I will sit in the audience or go backstage and I'll watch the speakers. I'm watching for style and technique, not so much content, not what they say, but how they say it. All right. Is that important when you're talking to clients? Yeah, sometimes it's not exactly important what you say, but how you say it is so important. So what I would do is listen to a recording or watch someone who's really good in your office doing what they do. Take notes. Go, okay, here's how they executed. But you have to observe. They have something that you don't have, so watch how they do it. How do they begin? What helps them connect quickly with a client or someone on the phone? What type, you know, obviously we're using the same script, but there's something that they're doing differently in their execution, so observe it, okay? I would encourage you to intentionally hone your skills to reach your potential. All of you have great potential, or you never would have even come on board with LGFG. I mean, you're a special class, hardworking, dedicated, you want to win. Most of you are pretty competitive, but if you don't intentionally hone your skills and watch people who are better than you do it and try to emulate that, then you just fall into unproductive habits that start to feel comfortable, which you don't want. They just sabotage your growth. So here's a big question on this, number 2. Who can you observe and then listen to? Okay? Take notes. Find somebody. I mentioned this before when I talked to Carl, I think it was a week ago. He already had a list of top performers that he was reaching out to, contacting, saying, you know, how do you do this? How do you do that? And just getting, not that they have tons of time to coach him to make him better, but he knows that there are certainly people better than him now, and he is trying to emulate that. That is smart. All right, number 3. Number 3. So we've got plan it, watch it. Third strategy, practice it. Practice it. Most of you, some of you don't think you're leaders, but you are. This is the leadership part of our LGFG training. You don't get better by just simply leading. I'm going to go lead. You get better when you practice good leadership behaviors. Okay? Again, if you're not practicing, you're not improving. Before this big concert we had this past weekend at Wichita State, hundreds of people there. Oh my gosh, so scary. I thought they were going to be old people, but it wasn't. It was all 20-somethings, and so it was kind of freaky. But here's the good news. 2 months out, 3 months out, I started working on my keyboard skills. Some of you saw a little keyboard that was sitting over here. And I'd watch YouTube, and I would practice, and I would go, okay, now that's a lick I can do. So I just tried to learn some new stuff and practice the old stuff. And once you practice, I knew I needed to work for sure. That's how you improve. If any of you play golf, is there even golf in Estonia? Or is it just frozen tundra? I don't, I don't know. Maybe I just can't imagine like, hey, Moscow, let's go play some golf. No, you're on a frozen lake. But anyway, if you've seen golf, a golfer goes to the putting green to practice one thing, and that on the putting green is putting. So a great golfer, if she's a professional, she might practice her grip while she putts. So she's going to pick one thing, not, okay, I got to hold this way, I got to stand this way, I got to do my feet this way, I got to look down this way, I got to hold my head this way, I got to use my shoulders this way. No, she might be very specific, practicing grip. All right. So for you guys, if you're leading an office, what are things that you can practice to get better at? I mean, it might be just how do we, when you have a little huddle at the end of the day, how many ways could you start a meeting creatively, or during the day? Some of you say, and I know it's hard, some of you just strap on the headset and you're like, okay, here we go. Dial, dial, dial. And that gets, if you're just doing it one after the other, that's hard work to stay focused and maintain your status and tone and all that good stuff. So here's a question to practice. How many strategies could you try that give you energy when you're doing that? This week, what can I practice? How can I stay energetic throughout the day? Some of you are like, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I start to fade. Okay, I understand that. What are some new things I can do, new habits that I can practice to give me energy, mentally, that can help me be clear? All right. So when I'm talking about number 3, which is just practicing, here's a real big tip. Practice one behavior at a time. Okay. I read a book years ago. So if some of you are like, I don't have any books to read. Well, here's one if you're like a high C detail person, you will like this. But it's by Robert Greene. And he wrote a book called Mastery. Mastery. That's the whole title. But it's all about how to master anything. Anything. He gives you kind of a step-by-step, super detailed way to master a new skill. And I'll give you the thesis, and that's he practiced one behavior at a time. I know when I was getting back into the pool, swimming, we had a coach early on that told you too many things to work on. She's like, you need to make sure your elbows stay high, and you got to pull all the way through, and then you got to rotate your head this way, and only half of it should be able. I mean, it was like you couldn't remember all that stuff. It was too much to work on, so you flailed about. What's much better is to pick one behavior at a time to work on. What am I going to work on this week? So you're going to watch somebody do something really well, and you're going to kind of pick that out and go, okay, she's doing something that I need to do. And then you're going to start practicing that one behavior. That doesn't mean you throw all your other good behaviors out. It means you just start to tweak one little thing. So and you'll mess up. It's great. I love when you mess up. Remember, failure is our friend, right? So don't get all pissed off. You're like, oh, I'm not good at this. Failure is our teacher, okay? He teaches us. I've personified failure, so he will be our friend. All right, so we've got those 3. And one more I want to share is you got to track it. So you've got to watch it, you got to practice it, you have to track it. That's another thing high performers do. They actually measure what's going on. They know their statistics. High performers don't just sit and work hard, but they track key behaviors and their performance indicators, you might call them. Again, going back to the gym, if you look for there are people where I work out who actually have personal trainers, and they have clipboards with notes. And you know what that is? I've looked at them. What they are doing is they're carrying that little notebook or that clipboard, and they know exactly what they're working on and how many reps they've done and where they're going to improve. Okay? But they're actually keeping track of it. They know how far they went on the treadmill. They measure their heart rate, and they record it. So my question to you is, what are you tracking? Not in the gym necessarily, But, well, it's fine to do that. But I'm saying in all of your life, whatever you measure gets, your brain notices and it starts to reinforce. Okay? So measuring stuff is real important. So here's a few thoughts on tracking it. How many positive affirmations did you give yourself today? Some of you are like, oh yeah, I don't really do that as much. I'm good at negative affirmations, like, man, I suck today. Well, that's good. Don't track that. Notice it, but then start tracking how many things you told yourself that built you up, you know? Here's another question. How much time are you wasting between calls? I'll bet some of you never even thought about that. You know, between clients, between those calls, nothing's happening. Now, if you are taking a break, splashing some water on your face, breaking your state, getting out of a negative mode when you're down on yourself, walking outside, taking 2 minutes to get some fresh air so you can get refocused. Okay, I'm not saying that's a big waste of time at all, but a lot of people, there is wasted time. You got a little Facebook notification, beep, beep, and you're like, oh, let me see what happened, you know, or, oh, there's an Instagram. Oh, my friend just posted some pictures of a cat. How interesting. Well, I wouldn't take unplanned breaks, you know. You can plan them in, that's fine, but then you got to get back into it. So are you measuring and tracking time between calls? All right, how about, here's another thought. I just wrote down random stuff. What self-reflection questions are you asking at the end of the day? Most people in the world do not reflect on their day. They just go, there goes Monday. Whoo, okay, tomorrow's Tuesday. I'm going to go home and watch some TV. That's it. So they never change, they never improve, they never analyze. They just like all the days blur together. And then they wake up and they're 40 years old and they're like, whoa, I'm 40. What happened? And nothing's changed. Okay? So if I can, that's another, you know, I've tried to encourage you guys to do lots of new behaviors, but taking 2 minutes to think about the day. I know some of you are really good. You journal, you write down thoughts at the end of the day, like how the day went, or you kind of a diary. And that can help you as you look through that. All right? So that's a good idea. And here's, I'll throw out one more as far as tracking. Are you tracking your expenses somewhere? Okay. Some of you are like, oh, yeah, I forgot to get a receipt for that. I forgot to get a whole week's worth of receipts. Well, you've got to track your expenses. Some of you would be a huge step forward. I just want to finish this call, making sure everybody feels guilty. Have you downloaded a budgeting app? You know, I know some of you are great budgeters. You're like, got it together, pretty good with that stuff. I know when I was, Rivas, I think he's downloaded a good budgeting app and stuff like that. And that's cool. I would encourage you, get a hold, keep track of where your money is and where it is going and where it's gone. Because again, that's a perfect situation where you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to do that. And then suddenly you're 45 years old and you're like, I'd like to buy a home, and you can't. Okay. So these are just tiny encouragements. My goal is not to make you feel bad if you haven't done them all. No one does everything right. We all have strengths. We all have weaknesses. But what separates people financially, since we're mentioning that, is they track it. They track where they are. Here's where my money is. Here's how it's growing. Here's the interest it's earning. Okay, they know where their money goes. All right. So that's kind of what we talked about. Those are my ideas. What I'd encourage you now to think about some of the ideas you guys wrote down. Since none of us is as smart as all of us, maybe you can compare notes and see what else you can add to our list. So we've got plan it, we got to watch it, we got to practice it, and then high producers track what they're doing. All right. So I will send you, we're going to send out the recording to people that couldn't come online. Does anybody have a thought or a strategy that helps you or someone you know be a high performer that other people neglect? Additions?
For another idea for high producers, I wrote down assess your failures, and then follow through as well.
Okay. Yeah. When you say assess your failures, that's kind of like, tell us more. I agree.
Like your failures are your teachers. So then any failure that occurs, assess why that happened, and then knowing what happened there, you can prevent it in the future, or then you can find out what was good about it or what was bad about it. So then next time around, you'll be more prepared.
Yeah, good. And Charles is good about that. He doesn't just, I mean, everybody has an element where you kind of beat yourself up for a few seconds, but hopefully you get out of that. You step back and say, okay, that didn't work. What does that teach me? Rather than, God, there I go again. I blew that. So stupid. Okay, that is a good way to just feel bad all the time. Okay, that's not what we're talking about, assessing failure by kicking yourself in the butt. That is not what we're talking about. We're talking about very clinically stepping back as a third party. Like if you stepped out of yourself and you could hit rewind, and you could rewind the day, or you could rewind a phone call and play it back and go, okay, where did I kind of make a mistake? And let me just tell you this last thing. No matter how good you are in sales, there are going to be a certain percentage of people that you just don't click with. It won't work. You can't sell everybody. So you can't like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I missed that. No, there's just some people who are just like closed-minded. You will not sell them. Even the best of the best, they just won't be sold. And a lot of times it's a timing issue. So I don't want to get off on another call. All right. Anybody else? Good. Thank you, Charles. Anybody else have a thought? Maybe 744-583-2454. I love that on my screen. I just love, there's not a name. It's just a number, which is our meeting room. Okay. All right. Well, listen, I will let you go be productive, and I want you to have another fantastic week. Go win some of those cool boots or a Lambo watch, or figure out if you're like, I have too many material things that surround me and I don't want to get caught up in that, then win it and send it to me, because I like nice things, and I can't win stuff because I'm not part of that part of the business. But I'm not bitter. I'm just telling you. So anyway, enough from me. You guys have a fantastic week, and we will talk again next time. Appreciate you being in business with me. Thank you. Carry on. See ya.